Hello everybody, I am Jackson Lang and welcome to Fantasy Football Fever. Quickly before we begin, I would like to point out that the point system that I use is full PPR scoring. Okay, let's get to the show. Our first segment is injury info. Our first player in injury info today is Kyren Williams. The Los Angeles Rams have placed Kyren Williams on the injured reserve, which comes as a surprise to many. He'll be out for at least 4 weeks, and then after the mandatory 4-week absence, the Rams will have their bye. So this means that he will not be available for at least 5 weeks. His backups are Darrell Henderson Jr. and Royce Freeman, who would not be bad waiver pickups. Our second player in injury info is Justin Fields. Fields has dislocated thumb, and it does not look like he'll be playing in Week 8. He may not even play in Week 9. If you have Fields, you should definitely make sure that you have a good backup QB that you're fine with starting this week and maybe even next week. Our third player in injury info is Jerome Ford. Ford suffered what Adam Schefter of ESPN said was a low-grade, high ankle sprain. This means he'll be out 1 to 2 weeks. This makes Kareem Hunt a great waiver pickup if he's still available in your league. Behind Hunt Sunday will be the former Patriot Pierre Strong Jr. However, I would not add him unless you really need another running back. Our fourth player in injury info is Pat Freiermuth. Freiermuth moved to IR last week with a hamstring injury. He's out for at least 4 weeks. However, I believe that once he's eligible to return, he will. His backups are Connor Hayward and Darnell Washington, but these players should most definitely not be added. Our fifth player in injury info is Kyler Murray. Murray was taking first-team reps at practice last week, but was not activated from the physically unable to perform list. It may take him 1 more week to be back in action, but he would not be a bad pickup if your QB has a late bye week. Our sixth player in injury info is DK Metcalf. Metcalf was out this week with hip and rib issues. This was his first absence of his NFL career. We will learn more about his availability for Week 8 later in the week during practice, so make sure you keep an eye on him. Our next segment is Start Sit. Our first start is Rashee Rice. In the past 3 weeks, Rice has begun to become a great flex option in fantasy. He's averaging 14 points through the last 3 weeks. He'd be a great flex to have and should definitely be started. Our next sit is Darren Waller. Waller's coming off an amazing week, but do not think that this will be an every week occurrence. Before this week, Waller was averaging just 9 points a game. There are probably other tight end options that may be even better than him, like Jonnu Smith in free agency, so I suggest that you sell him high and get rid of him at his peak. Our next start is Courtland Sutton. Sutton has been playing great this year and has had only 2 games without a touchdown. He's averaged 13 points a game and is most definitely a start for Week 8. Our next sit is Devonta Smith. We've all been waiting for that big bounce back week to come for Smith, but it just hasn't. He had just 5 targets while A.J. Brown had 3 times as much as him with 15 targets. Smith can be started once his targets and points both go up, but for now, he's a sit. Our next start is Josh Downs, the receiver for the Indianapolis Colts. Downs is coming off a great week and he looks like he's primed for a big season. The Colts receiver has averaged 13 points a game this year, and in the past 3 weeks, he has really broke out, scoring 60 points and averaging just 20 points a game. Our next sit is Gardner Minshew. Minshew is being sat simply because we do not know how consistent he is yet. He scored just 40 points, but I do not know if these huge eruptions will keep coming from him. However, if he becomes consistently good, he could be thought of as a start. Our next segment is Backfield Brawl. The first team in Backfield Brawl is the Patriots. Ramondre Stevenson had 2 less rushing attempts than Ezekiel Elliott this week in their upset win against Buffalo. Zeke has been playing a lot better over the past few weeks, and Ramondre has not been playing too great. This means that it would not be a bad thing to add Zeke and see how this plays out. However, Ramondre has not been playing good in reality, but in fantasy, he's been playing just fine over the past 2 weeks. He had 14 points, mostly because of his large role in the receiving game. He had caught all 6 of his targets for 51 yards. Zeke had 9 fantasy points with 11 rushes for 31 yards and a rushing touchdown. Our next team is the Colts. Jonathan Taylor and Zach Moss had the exact same amount of carries this week with 18 apiece. Taylor had a great fantasy game, but still did not regain his lead back position as I thought he would. Taylor had 75 rushing yards while Moss had 57. Taylor also had a bigger role in the receiving game than Moss with 3 receptions on 4 targets and 35 yards. Moss had 2 targets, a reception, and 5 receiving yards. Despite the split of carries, Taylor has been more productive, but Moss could also start to become a fine fantasy starter if he begins to get more yardage. Our next segment is a new one, and it's a Halloween special. It is Spooky Stars. This segment is about stars that are spooking me out by their bad play this year. Our first spooky star is Austin Ekeler. Ekeler is spooking me out by the way that he has been playing coming back from his injury. He's averaged just under 3 yards per carry in the past 2 games that he's been back. He really needs to show us that the Austin Ekeler that we all know is still inside of him somewhere, because whatever we are seeing is not very good. Our next spooky star is Josh Jacobs. Jacobs has averaged 3 yards a carry this season with 118 carries. For someone who led the league in rushing last year, he's been very disappointing. He has the 47th most fantasy points out of all players. He also has yet to top 100 fantasy points. That is spooky. Our final spooky star is T. Higgins. Higgins has been playing pretty bad this year. He has averaged, in all of the games that he has played, just 8 points. That is not the T. Higgins that I know, and it is spooking me out. Our next segment is trade advice. Our first player in trade advice is Kendrick Bourne, who should be targeted. Bourne has a relatively easy schedule coming up, and he has been playing great, and is also becoming one of Mac Jones' favorite targets. He also will not be too hard of a player to get in a trade, so he would be a good target. Our next player is Mike Evans. Evans has been playing great this year. In the 6 weeks that he has played, his bye week was in week 5, he is averaging about 19 points a game. He should definitely be targeted in any trade. Our next player to target is Kyren Williams. Williams is on the injured reserve, but this will just make him easier to get. He's been playing fantastic until he got hurt, and you should only have to wait 4 weeks for him to get back. He's a great IR stash that you should try to target, especially if you need running backs for late in the season. Hey! Our next segment is keeping up with the Joneses. The Pats won. Who would have thought that they would lose to Las Vegas and New Orleans, but then beat Buffalo? New England really took advantage of the Bills' banged-up defense. The Pats scored a whopping 29 points against the Bills. There were some rough points throughout the game, but all in all, I think that the Pats played great. They now move on to the Dolphins, who are coming off a tough loss to the Eagles, and with the way the Patriots are playing, they may have a shot at victory. That is all we have for today. Next week we will not be here because it is Halloween, so good luck in Week 8 and Week 9 in fantasy. Thank you so much for watching Fantasy Football Fever. I'm your host, Jackson Lang, signing off.